It's Matt Santagapita from the Santa Sells Houses team, and I've got John here from the City of London. John, I'll let you introduce yourself for everybody who's watching.
Matt, thanks for the invitation. I'm John Fyfe-Millar. I'm the Councillor of Ward 13. I'm a small business owner here in the city for around 30, 40 years. I've been a Londoner all my life, born and raised here. My wife Nancy and I live in Blackfriars, and I've got 2 kids. I've got one that's a plumber here in the city, and I've got a daughter in Toronto.
Nice. So the topic for today, John, when I emailed you was obviously, there were headlines in the paper when the city decided to do this, was the short-term rental. I was going to say ban, but it's not that it's really a ban because they are allowed. There's just more rules around it. But I guess the new bylaws around short-term rentals. So why don't you just explain what the new bylaw is for the City of London?
So the new bylaw around short-term rentals came in through, I'm going to say, a fairly extensive public participation session. We also looked at other municipalities to get a better handle on what they were doing. We got some feedback. But basically what it's doing, there's a few steps in here. One is, big one is licensing. Licensing is, I think, was a key and something I supported. The second piece was the taxation and paying in, for instance, to the municipal accommodation tax that the hotels pay into. And I think that was a big piece. I'm going to say the one I was challenged a little bit with was having it to be your primary dwelling. I think licensing might have taken into account some of the issues we were having with that. But I also think this is something that it as these bylaws come in, are always worth revisiting 2-3 years from now and making sure they're doing what we wanted them to do. And if not, then tweaking them so that we get out of them what we had planned.
Yeah. So I guess what are the biggest problems that I guess the city sees from short-term rentals, would you say?
I think there was a combination of a few things. One is the amount of housing that's perceived to be taken off the market. So right now, I'm going to say, I think at the report, there was about 600 plus units that were considered short-term rentals in the city. So bringing some of those properties back online into a market that at that point in time was starving for houses. That was one of the big things. I think one of the other pieces, and especially got this from some of the neighborhoods, was the fallout from properties that weren't well maintained and or weren't well organized as far as rental properties. Okay.
And what's the ultimate goal in the new bylaw? What does the city really want to accomplish? Like,
I think if I looked at it, to me, what it's doing is I consider a short-term rental like anything else. It's a business. It's putting a business license on something. It's ensuring that business license is playing on the same playing field as the other accommodation spaces are in our city. But what I like about the licensing is you have to meet the requirements. If you don't meet the requirements, then you get pulled. And I think a good example of that, you and I talked a little bit about the rental license that's there. With a rental license, you get an inspection.
Yep.
If you don't have a 6'6" ceiling height, the chances of you getting your rental license probably goes way down.
Yep.
But right now, when we look at things like our Airbnb policy, because we didn't have a policy, you didn't need to meet those requirements. You just needed to put up a spot for short-term rentals, and you could get around that. Well, I think it's meeting some of those accommodation pieces that we would consider to be important.
Have you guys had any pushback from the hotels about short-term rentals? Like, I'm assuming that Airbnb and vacation rental by owner. As I'm saying this, I'm kind of. I don't really think it would affect them that much, and I'll maybe explain that a little. Like, if I want to rent a house, I'm probably not looking to rent a hotel room, right?
Yeah.
So, but I would assume that the big hotel chains, I mean, they can't like Airbnb and vacation rental by owner, right? Like, they just can't, because I guess it does eat up some of their business, right?
It does. I think where you find it gets it, and I'm going to use this September coming in as a prime example. As we have students come back in to London to go to Western,
Yep.
a lot of those first-year students, their parents come with them. Right now, a lot of those parents would stay in a hotel.
Yep.
Given the choice, Airbnb and other short-term accommodation are all there for options. And because they're there for options, does it pull a little bit from the hotels? I think so. I don't think the hotels are concerned about people playing in the same sandbox as they are. They just want them to meet the same criteria as they have to do for that room.
Yeah. Because I guess, when you think about it, I mean, obviously, a hotel, they get inspected. They have to have sprinklers, fire extinguisher. Like they're scrutinized because it's a controlled market. You
100%.
could say, right? Like you can't just open up a hotel and
No.
do whatever you want, right?
Correct.
Here's the checklist. Work your way through.
And that's what the licensing will give us.
Yeah.
On a short-term rental. And I think I do think that's a really important piece. Because as much as we want this, and as much as we want to assume that people take the precautionary steps that they need to, we just find that going out and doing those face-to-face meetings and looking at it gives us an opportunity to address some of those concerns moving forward.
So this is maybe how's this fair to the people who bought a house and wanted to Airbnb it? And I mean, I know there are people out there who running Airbnbs or vacation rental by owner, that's their business, where they maybe own 5, 6, 10, 12. I mean, I've read stories about people who own 100 of them in multiple cities. I mean, how's it fair to those people?
So what I would say is this: for the people who have them right now, there's no issue with them converting that over to a long-term rental. Mm-hmm. That's very easy for them to do. For people that aren't interested in turning them over to a long-term rental, I'm sure that putting them back on the market is an option for them. But I think they have options that are available. When we went through the public participation process, they actually had an option of coming and talking. We did get a lot of feedback from Airbnb owners. Yeah. I think one of my challenges with the original feedback that we got and sitting in some of those meetings, there was a lot of pushback on any restrictions at all. It was an all or nothing. And you and I talked about this earlier. If you want to come up with a good solution, one of the best ways to do that is to have a dialogue.
Yep.
But to come in and say, no, I'm happy where I am right now and we want nothing, just wasn't going to be a solution. I think there could have been some give and take on both sides, but I think in a dialogue, we would have gotten to that point and gotten to a more comfortable situation. Yep. Because do I think that it'll be difficult? Definitely. I have no issue with that. But right now, then let's use your number. Let's say someone owned 5 Airbnbs with the sole purpose of renting them out as short-term rentals.
Yep.
That's a business to me. They're not running. And
I would agree.
Because it's a business, I think that they need to be licensed. I think they need to be taxed appropriately, and I think they need to be paying into the accommodation tax.
So then do you think, should there be some involvement from like Airbnb corporate itself, VRBO or vacation rental by owner? Like, should I guess these organizations that like really provide the easy push button framework? And I mean, I have no idea what, if you post your short-term rental on Airbnb, I don't know how much of a cut Airbnb gets. Yeah. I couldn't even tell you if it's a monthly fee or whatever. I have no idea because I've never personally done it and I've never looked at it. But I guess, is that maybe then eventually what happens is that the Airbnbs of the world, the vacation rental by owners of the world, like as those organizations, they then maybe have to get involved with municipalities everywhere and figure out how to potentially make this work in a way that everybody finds acceptable, I guess.
I think this is a good way. Everybody finds beneficial.
Yeah.
I think is a big thing. We did receive correspondence from Airbnb.
Yeah.
And the correspondence from Airbnb, a lot of it was around, the system's not broken, so let's not worry about it. again,
in their eyes.
In their eyes.
Which I understand why they would say that.
Absolutely. And I think, too, it goes around Airbnbs dealing with issues. And, we've all heard them, right? We've all heard them, that we have properties that are in neighborhoods, and all of a sudden it's 2:00 in the morning, and the Airbnb has got not 3 people in it, it's got 30 or 40 people in it. It's those sorts of things that we have to be able to deal with. And what I would always say is, when you look at the market, when you look at the short-term rental market here, I would have much rather have seen them come to the table and say, look, we know we have some issues, and here's some of our suggestions for dealing with those issues. We're comfortable with these things that you're proposing. We're not comfortable with this one item or these 2 items, but we have some options and we have some opportunities. So I think that's important, because a lot of what we did hear from neighborhoods was specifically that, was that they're dealing with the fallout of Airbnbs that have gone awry, and not being able to connect with the individual owning them, saying, you've got a problem here.
Yeah.
Let's deal with it.
So I guess from a bylaw, so Andrea, who is our office manager, she used to live next to an Airbnb.
Yeah.
And so, because in the office we're chatting about this, it's like, who has questions and, and all of that. And there were a few occasions where she's like, I hated it. It was a nightmare. She's like, most of the time it was okay, but, every now and then they'd put somebody in there and there'd be a banging party with 20 people in it, and it's a Wednesday night, and how do you deal with it? Yeah. So I guess, like, and this is maybe into just general bylaws of a municipality. I mean, okay, so if I'm the owner of a short-term rental and I rent it out and there's a banger of a party going on and somebody wants to make a complaint, is the onus on the property owner, I guess, to do something? And I guess really my question is, what can they really do? Or is it, to me, is that like, that's bylaw enforcement for noise and things, right? But I'm also assuming we probably also, like every industry, we have a lack of people.
Yeah.
So what do you do? Call the cops? Well, that's not high priority the way, like, some other, occurrence might be, right? So...
And I'm going to tell you, the first call that goes out normally in those situations is 911.
Yeah.
Because it's the number everyone knows. In a neighborhood, when you get to that point where you're actually going to pick up the phone and call someone, that's the number that you're going to call. Because it's gotten to the point where, okay, I'm beyond frustrated now, and this is what I'm going to do. Ultimately, it's like anything else. And again, when you look at your residential properties, your rental properties. And again, I'll be forthright here. My son owns 2. My son owns 2 properties, lives in a 3rd one here in the city. I've always said to him, it's unto you to keep your grass cut, to make sure the garbage goes out, to make sure your property stays clean and tidy. If you choose to give that to one of your tenants to do, that's fine, but it's still your responsibility.
Yeah. And if they don't do it, then it's okay. You have to address it. They still don't do it, I guess, in a landlord-tenant scenario. Okay, then you go to the tribunal.
Correct.
Which that could take you 12 months right now. But, But that's the game that you're playing in, right?
100%. So this is the same. Ultimately, the responsibility lies with the person whose property it is to ensure that the people that they're putting in there aren't doing this. If they do, if it was me... If I know my building next to me is an Airbnb and I know who owns it, my first call is going to them. And it's going to them for 2 reasons. One is, if the person that rented this out told you that they were coming with their grandmother for the weekend to go to Western, right now you got a party of 30 people in here, which that individual is probably going to say, okay, I got a problem. I got to go deal with it. But it also creates that environment with your neighbors in a neighborhood that says, hey, this guy's responsible. He was here. He dealt with it.
Yeah.
But if not, if it goes to the police, your point's well made. We've got cops right now coming on shift with 200 calls in the backlog. Yeah. The Airbnb disturbance at 3:00 in the morning is not a priority.
That's going to 201.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not,
No, and that's exactly it. And it's an unfortunate situation right now, but it is a reality. Because I go back to when I'm picking up that phone to make that call, this is of what's importance to me right now. Mm-hmm. And it is it takes a lot. I really do. I think it takes a lot to get somebody to pick up that phone and call.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, there's probably a small percentage of people where, you go out on your front porch, two people, and you just start talking. Someone calls and complains it's too loud. But for the most part, I think people, that line you cross is pretty distant for most people with noise and disturbances. I mean, especially if it's every night, then okay, that's a different story. But most of these scenarios are probably once every 6 months, 12 months
Absolutely.
type thing.
Yeah.
I just had a question that I thought that I wanted to ask. What the heck was it? I can't remember.
I can also say, too, part of as you look at development of some of these properties are being developed into, or were being developed into party houses. They were being designed right around that.
Really?
And I can tell you, I sat on committee of adjustment.
I mean, I'm
at the
not
city.
surprised.
No.
Because especially if, let's just say you're in certain neighborhoods, like, okay, Riverbend. Nobody would do that in Riverbend. It just wouldn't make sense. But when you're talking, like the Woodfields, like anything close to downtown or call it by the schools potentially. Yeah, absolutely. I could see people.
Yeah. So and we would see them when they would come in and you'd see a design and you're looking at a design. And when you're looking at a design that has, we've got 5 bedrooms in here, but we have the rest of it is just one huge living space.
Yeah.
And what do you do in that property? Well, I'm an Airbnb owner. That's not being developed for a small get together. That's being developed for.
This is a party house.
Yeah, exactly. And so, do we try to avoid those? Sure we do. Yeah.
Isn't that part of just living in a capitalist society?
It is.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
the tough one, right? Because it's there's a market for it.
Absolutely.
But if you're the one creating it, I guess it's you better also accept the nightmare that you're going to get when people complain and don't like it. Because
that's it.
What is it? There's when you purchase a property, you're entitled to what is deemed reasonable enjoyment.
Yes.
And I guess maybe that's what's reasonable enjoyment. Most people probably have no idea.
Yeah.
But a component of that means, well, yeah, you can't just make all the racket you want.
No.
Whenever you want.
Well, and I think when you look at policies, for instance, out of Airbnb too, they are very specific on that, right? Yeah. Like they will tell you in their policies that that's not what these houses are designed for at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So with that, their policies on how these properties are put on are very clear.
Yeah.
On how they use that. So do I think I don't disagree. I think there is that piece, but I would also say I would look at that and say I've got a numbered company owning that model, running a business of an Airbnb in a residential neighborhood that maybe isn't zoned for a party house, I'm going to say, so to speak. So I think that, I think the ones that do really well are the ones that have relationships with their neighbors, are respectful of their neighbors, and say, hey, look, no, we understand that this is a community and that we try to bring people in together. I can tell you my wife and I were in another city in the States, and this was prior to COVID, but it was a club that we went to in a neighborhood, and one of the best things I saw, there was a note at the door, and it was very clear, do your goodbyes before you leave this building. When you leave this building, you're walking into a neighborhood, and we expect you to go quietly and courteously to your car and leave. And that, to me, is, hey, we recognize where we are. We recognize we're in a residential area. We recognize we have to be respectful.
Mm-hmm. So do you think eventually then you might see restrictions on short-term rentals to only specific areas in a city? So instead of, and again, I'll just the real outer edges in the neighborhoods, right? I mean, to me, short-term rentals are more about being closer to the core or to stadiums and things like that. Or, I mean, we don't have it's not like London has a beach or anything like that. But do you think
we were going to have a beach at one point in time, right down by the Thames River? Remember, we were going to put a beach down there.
What?
Don't you remember that?
No.
Come on. See, that's why I've lived here for so long. There was going to be a beach right down at the Forks of the Thames.
Why didn't they do it?
You know what? You'll have to ask. Who was that?
When was this?
Joe Fontana.
Okay, that's a while ago.
Yeah, it was a while ago. But they were going to put a beach out.
Well, they should. I mean, like, really, when you look at, there's nothing. I shouldn't say there's nothing. I mean, there are things around the river. Yeah. But there really isn't compared to a lot of other cities.
I would agree with that. I think we underutilize our river.
It makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
And I understand it's not the prettiest river. I mean, the water can get pretty low and it can look a little blah, but okay, I'm pretty sure those types of things could probably be improved, but yeah it's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Like even like a walking path, bike paths that go along the river completely makes so much sense to me.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, in Blackfriars where they put in the dike, the new dike, it's fabulous. It's an incredible walk. It's safe. It's well lit. The city did a fabulous job in there.
Yep.
And so I don't disagree with you though. I think around our river, I think we really underutilize that space. I think we could utilize it better. I think, what city, when you look at London, probably your major downtown intersection is Dundas and Richmond. It was when I grew up here.
Yeah.
5 minutes. In a 5-minute walk, I can walk into green space out of our core.
Yeah.
And you know what? I think that's really good. But do we have to do that all along the river? Probably not. I think getting some development along the river that develops that face and that experience would be fabulous.
Yeah. Whatever happened to the old South Street Hospital lands? Weren't they talking about doing a development and like a boardwalk of some sort that would come all the way and then end, I guess, at the Forks, I think is what they were talking at some point. Is that?
Yeah. So Medallion's there now.
Yeah.
Medallion's building there now. So they're on the, I'm going to say they're on the south side where the river is. So they'll be developing that space. Soho Alliance has bought the old hospital lands that are north of South Street in there. I believe there are, and I want a ballpark, but I'm going to say 6 to 8 buildings going up there. I think you're going to see a real revitalization in Soho, and I think Soho is a great environment for that because it's a walkable community to the downtown.
Yep.
So I can live in. It's going to give me the opportunity to live in multi-unit residential. It's going to give me the opportunity to purchase a home with a backyard.
Yep.
But still, if I want to work downtown, I can walk.
But can't do a short-term rental.
I can't do a short-term rental. No, I cannot. Well, and I'll define that. I could if it was my principal residence right
Bingo.
now.
Yeah.
So I could. And what I'm hoping, I'm going to be honest, with this, I would tell you I'll really challenge the industry right now, the short-term rental industry.
Yep.
They've got an opportunity now to look at this bylaw, use it, and come back to us in a year and 18 months and say, okay, here's some of our feedback. And I think that feedback's really important. When we get that, it allows us to look at some of the options. Did that change put some of those houses back into the market that we wanted to put back into the market?
That's a good question.
Did we get long-term rentals out of them? Or what are we doing? How is it working out and what's working best? But I think it's really important in order to have that dialogue is you want to make sure that you have those stats that you want to have in front of us to sit down and have a conversation and say, no, we're happy with this and this. This is the one that's holding us up.
Do you know who which municipality, and I'll say like in Canada, was the first to introduce similar bylaws?
Don't know which one first. I know Toronto has worked on one again.
But they don't have it out yet?
I don't think so. They're working on it. But again, you look at Toronto, there's an awful lot of housing in Toronto that's being tied up right now on short-term accommodation. And
there's a lot of vacant housing in Toronto too.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. As hungry as we are for housing, I'm going to be honest, I just don't think we are the tip of the iceberg as compared to a place like Toronto.
Yeah, I remember there was an article, I don't even know, 6 months, could even been a year ago. They were talking about the number of vacant houses in Canada. Yeah. And they estimated sitting at, I think it was like 1.3 million, which is a staggeringly large number considering we're 35, 36 million people in this country, right? And
Absolutely.
let's just say, okay, maybe the average household is not 4 people, but I'm just going to use 4 as an example. Like, that's a lot of vacancies. Now, however, I can't remember if that would include people who own a cottage and then they would consider one of those to be vacant.
Yeah.
I have no idea, but...
And that could be. I can tell you, doing a lot of door-to-door here right now in this ward, in Ward 13, there are a ton of houses that are multi-unit homes. But with that, I'm really intrigued as to how many of those units are actually rented out right now. Because, no matter how we look at it, at the end of the day, we have a housing crisis in London. We are
in Canada.
In Canada.
And this has been going on for years.
Yes.
This is not just like the past 2 years. This has been going on for 10 years, call it.
Absolutely. But how do we address it? And how do we address it quickly? And I'm going to give you an example of, we're looking at putting in subsidized housing in new builds, which I think is a good idea. But that subsidized housing is 5-7 years away.
Yes.
I think we have an opportunity.
And could even be further away, too.
It could, absolutely.
That goal line could get moved.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Where I think we can make a big change now is existing units that aren't being rented. And maybe we need to make some minor modifications to them, but we need housing. We need housing badly. And how do we get that onto the market safely, cost effectively, but then get somebody in a unit that really needs to have a unit to live in?
So here's an interesting stat that came out from CMHC about I'll send it to you. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's interesting. They looked at a bunch of cities and they looked at new construction condos. Did you see this? And they said in 2020, 80% of new construction condos sold and closed in London, 80%. Were to people who were not using them as their principal residence.
Really?
I don't know if I buy it because, and I just think, well, how many, there's most people just think, I call them the beehives, the high rises. It's not like we have 20 high rises going up. We get a sprinkle a year, but there's, that would also be single floor detached condos, townhouse complexes, things like that. 80%'s a lot, and I think that number was something like 1,600.
Really?
And I was like, I have a hard time believing in London 16, because to me that's more, the way they were framing it was a little bit more, these are speculators, where it's like, okay, I'm buying these, I'm going to sit on it for a year or two, maybe they rent it, maybe they don't, but they're just hoping it goes up 20, 30, 40%, whatever it is. And then they'll sell it, make some money, and go on to the next one. I just I'm being like, I really had a hard time reading this, thinking, yeah, right. Because here's the other thing: how the heck does CMHC know this? Because that's been a debate in real estate for a long time in Canada. Whenever they talk about foreign buyers, there's no mechanism to really truly track it.
Interesting. See, I find that so. What I can tell you, and you're right. When you look at some of the buildings that have gone up downtown. I know when Azure went in, as a prime example, to get a 1-bedroom in Azure, you needed to put $20,000 down.
Yep.
$20,000 down, lock that in for you. I knew a lot of people that went and said, yeah, I'll put $20,000 down on a unit and wait for this building to finish, and then I'll put it back on the market again. So I can see if you look at it that way, but I find 80% high. Yeah. I find 80% really high. I think with that, I think condos are something we need in this city. When my parents moved here in 1960, my parents bought their house in Byron, which was a new home, for $14,000. Mm-hmm. Now I can
wish you could have bought 20 of them. Eh?
Yeah, really. Eh? And I can premise that by saying it took my dad almost 25 years to pay that house off. At $14,000. But that said, it was a starter home. We don't have starter homes anymore.
No.
We don't develop starter homes anymore. We don't develop starter homes in neighborhoods anymore. So really the starter home has become a multi-unit development. It can be a townhouse. It can be a high-rise. But I think it's really important that we have those, because I think it's really important one of the things we all grow up desiring is home ownership.
Yeah. Home ownership's a really good thing.
It is, and it's a fabulous thing. So we need to be able to get people into home ownership, recognizing this isn't my forever house, but I am being able to put money into something that I can.
So is there any dialogue then going on at the city with respect to, call it like a single family home, but also getting ADUs in them, so accessory dwelling units, or have you ever heard of like garden suites? This is more it started in the West Coast years ago. Yeah. The people call them even like alley homes, where you literally pop up a small secondary house on your property. Is the city talking about any of this?
A lot of discussion around that now, because the province put that in, right? The province made it very clear they want secondary dwelling units on properties. There's some limitations we put on those, and a good example is your property can have 5 bedrooms.
Yep.
So if you have 3 in your house, you could put up a secondary dwelling unit that has 2. If you have 5 in your house, you can't put up a secondary dwelling unit.
What's the definition of a bedroom then?
I think they would draw that out. I think that you define what that is. So I think if you had a house and you said, I've got 3 bedrooms, I've got a den here, and I use it for a den, or I use this for an office.
Yep.
I think you get that flexibility. I think one of our biggest challenges right now, what COVID has done is put people in a position where they no longer need to work at the office 5 days a week.
Yep.
I think we've had a lot of movement here from areas like Toronto.
Oh, big move. Yes.
Yes. But they've kept their job. Mm-hmm. So we have people who aren't coming into our environment to work, but they have people who are taking up the homes that we have.
Yep.
So when you look at our unemployment rate, a lot of the businesses I know right now are screaming for people. Good,
every business owner
people.
I know right now needs to hire, and they can't find anybody.
And so I think that is a big challenge. I think it's a huge challenge for us looking for appropriate housing. And again, I think that affordable housing is a key component, but we can't lose sight of the fact that we talk all the time. Why can't we hold on to our students in London? We can't hold on to our students because they've got nowhere to live. So they finish at Western, and they're going, that's great. I'm done. All I want is a 1-bedroom. I'll look to take a job here, whatever. Can you find a 1-bedroom? No, not right now.
Yeah.
I think the last number I saw on the rental market right now was about 0.75% is our vacancy rate in rental market. And a lot of that...
I'm shocked at that number. I would say it's lower.
See? And if it's lower...
But, yeah, and
that
that's...
could be. But a lot of that, they're telling us, is because it's a unit switchover.
Yeah.
The unit's empty for 15 days because I'm painting, cleaning carpet, doing what I need to do. So I question whether we have rental space at all.
And this was years ago. I can't remember when this was, but I remember reading something, and they said in North London the rental rate was negative 0.2.
I can believe it.
And I was sitting there thinking, okay, you can't go negative on this stat. Like, it could just be 0.
Yeah.
But you can't, I mean, I guess that would mean you're double renting something.
Either double renting or does it mean, it could mean you're double renting.
It didn't make any sense to me.
No.
But okay, so here's something. So I've actually worked with a couple developers and builders on some ideas about doing housing with ADUs and as well building them and setting them up with like tiny houses in the back or garden suites or whatever. Yeah. Lenders have a problem.
Yes.
Lenders will not recognize tiny houses or garden suites as adding any value to the property whatsoever, which to build a tiny house, call it, you'd probably be, maybe you could borderline get it done for 80 grand. And that's a big maybe.
Yeah.
Realistically, it's probably going to cost you 6 figures.
Yeah.
But it would allow you to bring in additional income and afford to potentially spend the money to do it. So there's that. But I guess the other thing, like, I don't, maybe I'm wrong, but everybody's been by a London development. Yeah. Lots are not that big anymore. So really, I guess maybe the ADU option is the only thing. But then, I guess from a city standpoint, there's a fine line between you're building a duplex and you're building an accessory dwelling unit. I mean, most people don't want somebody cutting through their space if they're renting a 1 or 2 bedroom. And then if you have it fully separated, now you have other fire rules, you have other things like, and I mean, in the end, I think the biggest problem that we have when we talk about housing and everything, it's the bloody cost of everything.
Right now? Oh, yeah.
It's right. Like, I mean, at one point a 2x4 was $10.
Yeah.
You know, now I'm not saying should a 2x4 be 25 cents. I have no idea what a 2x4 should be. I mean, I like the free market. I believe that collectively, you know, the herd of people kind of get to decide what happens. I mean, you want gas prices to go down? Okay, everybody stop buying gas from one gas station. You'll probably see the prices go down. Like, you can do that stuff, right? But we don't. Like, I know Chatham recently, I think it was last week, they're waiving development fees, is what I heard. Have any municipalities, now that's a touchy one because, I mean, cities need revenue to operate. I mean, urban sprawl is expensive because we need sewer plants, water infrastructure, you know, all of these things. Has that been a consideration for maybe specific type of units? Like, I don't know. I mean, I know they do every now and then waive development fees downtown for high rises, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if they're still doing it. I know they have in the past. Do they put restrictions on things like sizes and types or anything like that when they do it? No? Okay.
No, it's good. I'll tell you, part of what we do is we ask for those development fees up front, like any other development. But for instance, in the downtown, they get paid back.
Yeah.
So that's how we do it. And part of that is the cost of doing some of the work at the front. If you do it on everything, it becomes a little bit more of a challenge. But I think back to your point on sprawl, we have a challenge here in the city. You know, we went through and we have this conversation all the time that when we want to do infill, that we don't do at times proper consultation with the neighbors. I'm challenged with that a little bit because I'm going to tell you that when we did the London plan, we did tens of thousands of hours of consultation in this community on what do we want and how can we be successful. Yep. And one of the big things that came out of it is inward and upward development. Yep. That's one of the things that we know is cost effective and we also know the city will benefit from. I've always said we live in a city now basically of 500,000 people.
Yeah.
Our downtown is not representative of that. Our downtown is underrepresented of what that means to live in a city of 500,000 people.
I would agree.
And so we need to focus on the where, the when. And I think when we do that, having and engaging in those conversations with neighborhoods around what that development is going to look like and what it's going to feel like is imperative. I think we have to do that. But to simply say you don't want it isn't a solution to a problem.
Yeah.
Because we need to develop our downtown. I go back to in 2014 when I was on the BIA here, we did a survey, and at that point in time, 55,000 people were coming into our downtown core every day to work.
Really?
Yeah.
In 2014.
2014. In 2019, that number had dropped to 39,000.
Wow. Okay, that's big.
That's
a big
2022, post-COVID, I'm going to tell you that number is half.
Yeah, I don't even know.
So the success of our downtown is going to be the conversion of our downtown to a neighborhood where people choose to live.
Yep.
It's going to be a huge thing. And I said, the very first council meeting I went to, I said, infill is hard. It is extremely difficult on a community. But it doesn't mean it's not the right thing to do, and it doesn't mean it's not what we agreed upon when we had the London plan put together.
Yep.
This is what we wanted to do. This is what we saw. I can tell you, I'm yet to go to a planning meeting dealing with an infill property where the neighbors aren't upset.
Oh yeah, I mean,
and that's the reality of what we're dealing with. The question becomes: is it the right thing to do?
Yeah. So how do you convince people that, hey, infill is the right thing to do.
You know what I try to do, and I think I've done this really well. Having relationships with the developers who are developing in these communities is paramount, because what it gives you is an opportunity to talk to them from the beginning of when they're looking at doing a development. At that point in time, I'm a really big believer in community benefit agreements. Mm-hmm. I think tying a community benefit agreement to that development and creating that conversation and dialogue with the community of what do we want to get out of this. Mm-hmm. And I think you can do that. And I think most developers are very, very open to the fact that, you know what, this is what I want to do. This is how I want to do it. Great, but what are you going to do for the community? How does this benefit the community? I'm a big believer that feet on our streets benefits all of our communities. It benefits us from a safety aspect. Yep. It benefits us from a commerce aspect. So we get a lot out of that, but there needs to be other pieces to that pie, mm-hmm. I think. And I think we can get that through items like that. But again, it goes back to our original conversation around sitting down and having a conversation. If the conversation is simply no is easy.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
It really is.
A very, very simple conversation.
Yeah.
The harder conversation is, this is going to come. If it's going to come, what do we want out of it to benefit us? So at the end of the day, we're going, as a community, we're stronger than we were.
Yeah. Where do you see, well, actually, no, before I ask that question, I'll say this. Being somebody who has been downtown for decades, the past 2 years, when you say like, it was like about dropped to 39 and it's half, I bet you it's even lower than that, the amount of people. Because it is, I mean, the last 2.5 years, I mean, you know, we made a commitment to keeping our office downtown. And what was interesting, maybe not interesting, it's not the, one observation when we were in, call it like the real COVID scenario. I mean, it's kind of dwindled now, but you had to bring your lunch because you didn't, there was nobody was open. Like you, and even now, like, you know, we know a lot of these business owners for food, let's just say like food and things like that, their lunch crowds are nil.
Agreed.
And you look at it, there's only so, like, we talk about it in the office a little bit, and I've chatted with a few business owners about it. I mean, there's only so much time that they can stick it out, right? A lot of them, and there's some businesses coming back. I know some of the office space, they have said, yeah, we can, like, let's go back to the office, but some of them are only getting 15% of their staff back. Now, I think it's kind of interesting timing because some of these bigger companies that you're seeing with some, you know, economic shifts that are going on, they're starting to fire some people because they're trimming the fat. They just, that's what you have to do in certain times. But the whole work from home, I don't believe it's a long-term going to work. And for a few reasons. One is we are pack animals. We are designed to, you know, I call it being tribes, whether that's in the workplace, whether that's your group of friends, whether that's your family. We are designed to be doing this, sitting across from each other, spending time face to face, not on a computer screen. Yeah. We are healthier doing this. But the scarier part is that people need to realize they need, like a downtown core. Yeah. I mean, I remember, you know, so my father, in the building where we're at, my father had a hardware store. Okay. And I remember the whole downtown used to be great. And then it was, pardon for me saying it this way, it was absolute garbage for 15 years. Nobody wanted to come. The real business owners that cared about the community stuck it out. And we had this upswing. And then 3 years ago, things happened. And then now it's like, okay, I mean, the drug abuse, the homeless problem, I mean, it's amplified. I mean, some of the stuff that I've seen downtown in the past 24 months is mind-boggling and concerning where, you know, I mean, we have women in the office and I said, you know, if you do not feel comfortable walking to your car, you need to let us know. I will walk you to your car. Because it is concerning. Now, it's gotten better. Don't get me wrong. Now that things have loosened up and gotten better, it's changing. But I also have a problem forcing people to do certain things. Like, how do you really say you're either going to go work in the office or you're losing your job? I don't know if that's appropriate either. But anyways, what I wanted before I made those comments, what I wanted to ask, where do you see London going in the next 5-10 years?
So for me, I'm going to tell you that I think London is a great, one of the reasons I live here, I think it's a great city. Our downtown, I'm going to tell you, our downtown has had its challenges through COVID, no question. We've traveled to a lot of the other Canadian cities. We're not alone there. No. But I always premise that by saying, just because you're not alone doesn't mean that it's okay.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the reality. What I see, and I think the big difference, and I think you made the comment, I'm a big believer that your city is as healthy as your downtown. When you go into a city, and when we visit cities, we always go to the downtown. Because if the downtown is strong, I'll tell you, the rest of the city is doing okay at the end of the day. And I think one of the most interesting ones we went to was Cleveland. We went to Cleveland. They had revitalized a big chunk of their downtown, but literally you hit a spot where nothing had been done. And it was like crossing into a different time zone.
Really?
Yeah. But I see London, this is what our downtown is changeable very quickly. We have a small downtown. It's a tight downtown. Mm-hmm. I think what will change is people living here. I really do. You've got an opportunity to bring people in to live here, to work here, to be able to walk to and from work. I think your comment on the restaurants is spot on. Part of it, and you are probably down here a lot. I'm down here a lot. Staffing is a huge issue.
Big problem right now.
The ones that are open for lunch are struggling because there's not people here. I'm really hoping that some of these businesses are waiting till September, saying, okay, we've got the summer. Let's go through, and then let's see what's going to come out the other side after September. You and I agree, working from home. I think we tried to talk ourselves in 2020 that working from home was a great thing.
Yeah.
I think we learned through 2021 working from home is not as great as we thought it was. I don't think we always talk about productivity. It just can't be the same. And to try and tell ourselves over and over that it is the same, I just don't think that's the case. But I see this downtown poised to be a great downtown. I think we have an opportunity to be a great downtown, bringing people here. You've heard the argument probably as long as I have about a grocery store in the downtown.
Yeah, that's one that's needed.
Yeah, and that will come with people living here, right? Yep. And when we look at the new buildings that are coming up now, I see the number of people on the street starting to change that. One of the things I think we need to do is we have I'm going to say a bad time in our downtown, and it happens about 5 o'clock at night. And that is 5 o'clock at night, everyone leaves. And it becomes a ghost town.
Time to leave.
It does. Oh, it takes a long time to leave right now. I'm surprised you haven't
30
said that.
minutes to get out. Yeah. But I mean, it's like half the roads are shut right now.
Absolutely.
Because there's, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is it 5, 6 high rises going up?
Yes.
And then and so some of it has to do with that. Some of it is just general infrastructure. There are days where it's like, you'd be better off. I live in Thorndale.
Okay.
So I got a 30-minute commute, right? Okay. I love working downtown, and I love living outside of the city. I just like space. I like nature. Yeah. My kids are very outdoorsy. And there are days where I think I should park 30 blocks away and just bike and then go, because you can't leave. Yeah. It's like trying to leave downtown during after a London Knights game. Oh, yeah. Is what it sometimes feels like, and you're like, but there's nothing going on. Like this is not that. Of course, it's end of day, everybody's leaving, but yeah, you walk around 5:30, 6 o'clock.
It's quiet.
It's very quiet.
It's very quiet, and then picks up a little bit around 7 because people are coming back for dinner. Yep. Living downtown, that will change. That dynamic will change, and I think That's important. But one of the things I find, too, is an ability to have a nightlife down here.
Yep.
One of the things that I think we really need to take advantage of is our music destination. I think the UNESCO music designation has given us an opportunity, especially in the downtown, to create a music environment down here that we want, that will attract people. Because I think it's interesting that I'll go sit in the market parking for 30 minutes to get out, instead of looking at my buddy and saying, hey, you know what? Let's go over to here, sit down, have a drink. We'll talk about our week. We'll listen to some music. I'm going to go in there 40 minutes from now and get out in 10 minutes. And so I think we have to create that environment. But the downtown, when you think about it, the downtown's been under construction now for 5 years.
Yes.
Like, I mean, you know, when I look at somebody like Jerry Pribble over at Chaucer's in Marienbad, Jerry went through Fanshawe for 3 years, then started the construction on the Loop, went through COVID. Like, it's been a long time. And so the Loop itself, most of it should be done this year. Next year, they are going to dig up Wellington. There's no question. It's going to get dug up as the final piece. But one of the big pieces that was being done downtown that needed to be done was London was built on a sewer system that didn't separate.
Yeah.
That system now does. And that's what we're putting in. And, like, I mean, when you look at some of the infrastructure they pulled out on Dundas Street, it was wooden.
Yeah.
Because it hasn't been done.
Yeah. Wooden pipes.
And now we will have... Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And it's like, how old are wooden pipes?
Exactly.
80, 100. I don't even know. I honestly have no idea. But I have some friends who work in infrastructure, and they say, like, it is mind-boggling, the stuff that comes out of the ground in London.
And I think that's good. I think the other thing too is we have some really good backbone pieces here. Adding Bud Gardens down here, fabulous. The library is great. Covent Garden Market is a fabulous asset. So we have some really strong assets to bring people in. I think one of the things, and I've said this before, we need a parking garage down here. I think we need to get rid of our surface level parking, and I think doing that and putting in an appropriate parking garage, which allows me to recharge, which gives me secure bike storage if I want to ride downtown. I think facing it with some form of retail and or commercial, so the parking is in the back. So
hide
it's
the
not
parking.
Face front.
Yeah.
But we need some parking down here. And I know that argument comes up all the time, that's saying that I'm anti-cycling. I'm not anti-cycling. What I am saying is our downtown needs to be welcoming to everyone who chooses to come here. We also have to recognize that in southwestern Ontario, we're the largest urban center here. So our downtown is not just the downtown for London. It's the downtown for Thorndale. Yeah. It's the downtown for Arva. It's the downtown for Kamoka. I'm not going to drive from Kamoka to White Oaks to park to get on a BRT bus to come downtown.
Not a chance.
I want to come down here, park in a parking garage. My car's secure. I want to plug it in if I need to plug it in. I want to go out to dinner and have a good time. Those are the things that we have to have. I get frustrated at times when we have conversations through the city and around the city about who do we want to exclude from this discussion. I'll be honest, in the downtown, I don't want to exclude anyone.
No, it's not appropriate.
I'll tell you right now, the business owners down here, if they thought that people were going to ride horses into downtown London, they would be on us so quickly to put up hitching posts for them, and I'd do it if I thought that would get them here.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is we have to stop having conversations about excluding people and start having conversations of how do we bring everyone here safely, jointly, to have a good time.
Mm-hmm. I think you're the right person for downtown.
Oh, thanks.
Well, on that note, John, I want to thank you very much for coming in. We've had you here for a little over an hour.
It's great.
I know you got some other stuff to do, but thank you very much for coming in. Hopefully we can have you again.
Anytime. And hopefully after October 24th, I'll be back.
There
and
you
then
go.
we'll have a good conversation.
Sounds good.
Thanks very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care.